Good afternoon, my name's Colin Leith and I'm a subject advisor here at Edexcel. I'm going to take you through some of the changes that the linear reforms have brought about. What's going to happen is I'll go through some of the general changes first. Some of these slides will not be specific to business studies, they're general slides which you may want to share with colleagues. Then the second set of slides are about the specific changes and we'll look at the impact of the reforms on business studies. So looking at our first slide, the summary of what's happening, you may have seen the press announcements, you may have heard already about this linear reform. Linear, as you will have heard, means that all the examinations have to take place at the end. But alongside these reforms, the other bullet points there point to some of the changes that have been brought in. Now the SPAG, the spelling, punctuation, grammar, has been introduced for some subjects, although not for business. But the other implications of linear are that there are no more resits, there's no more January, so the January series will go, and the 40% terminal rule, which you may have been just getting used to, has been replaced by what is effectively a 100% terminal requirement. The controlled assessment isn't going to change, but we're going to say that you can do it a little bit earlier. We're going to try and release the titles a little earlier. So that's the general introduction. I'll be returning to some of these points as we go through, but please bear in mind that these first slides are generic slides. This timeline is a good example. I'm going to take you through this timeline, which shows all the different exam series that we run. Now you might be a little puzzled by this because March and November are not familiar to business studies teachers, but maths and science use these, and so this particular slide has been designed to take a lot of the changes across all the GCSE subjects into account. Now I'll add some of these little buttons. Some of them will apply to business studies, but you'll see that these at the bottom here to do with English and maths, so we can skate over those. The last one I've put up over here, January and March. The January one is specifically of interest to us. It says series no longer used for GCSE exams. Now that will have an impact on business studies. The green one there is again for English. These don't apply to us, so I will sort of skate over these. The last green one at the bottom here, September 2011, where it says first teaching of new linear GCSEs for 3-year courses. This is important for those centres who do the course over 3 years. I'm aware that that doesn't happen to everybody, but it will affect some people. Moving on, there's going to be more things appearing here. September 2012, this coming September, the first linear start for year 10s. Then there's some more green boxes being added. Again, they don't apply to us. The last one I've added here, June 2014, GCSEs available as linear qualifications. We'll come back to that, but that's clearly important to us. And then lastly, some more things to do with English. So apologies for this rather crowded slide. I'll be returning to a business version of it, which you'll see is far less crowded. I'd just like to, by way of introduction, ask you in this poll here just to see what we have in terms of pathways chosen. There are 3 pathways, as you're aware, on our GCSE, and I'd like to get a feel for what the pathways are that we've chosen. We've got the business studies pathway, the business communication pathway, and the business and economics pathway. Just like to, from my point of view, have an idea of what pathways the delegates in this session are delivering. I think that's probably everybody. Let's see what the results are, which pathway do you deliver, and it looks as though the vast majority are doing the business studies pathway, with a couple doing the business and economics and the business communications. Okay, thank you for that. Now let's just move that out of the way and move to the next slide. Now when we've got the new specifications up on our website, which you may have seen, you'll be puzzled to learn, well, what's new? What's new? Well, the new specs on the website removes any references to January, but other than that you won't see any other changes. The unit content hasn't changed, the assessment hasn't changed, other than the timing of the assessment. So this first slide really just to remind us that very little is changing as far as the spec is concerned. The SPAG marks, spelling, punctuation and grammar, this will affect your colleagues in other subjects such as geography and history. We're not removing the SPAG that's already there. For example, in the Units 3, 4 and 5 exams there's still the asterisk question. In the controlled assessment it's still implied in the analysis and evaluation criteria, but we're not adding SPAG as other subjects are seeing. So very little change, very little change. Controlled assessment, again, we're going to continue the controlled assessment model that we have, still based around 5 tasks. The only change we're planning is to bring forward the time when you can do it by making the titles available in the January rather than the June of the preceding year. So, for example, you may have got used to the idea of the June 2012 titles. They were available in May 2011. The June 2013 titles will be available on May the 16th, 2012. But when it comes to the June 2014 titles, we're hoping to make them available a lot earlier, in January of the preceding year, to give you 18 months to do it. So no change in the actual content, just in the timing of the release. This slide here, again, is a generic slide. This reminds us that there's no January session. If you have students who would like to resit their GCSE, then they would have to do it the following June. And this slide shows us you can carry forward the controlled assessment marks if you wish, but they would have to do the exams again, all of the exams, Units 1 and 3, 4, 5, the following June, so they couldn't resit in January. The fifth slide looks at the performance tables. These have been much in the news. As far as they affect GCSE Business, if you're not aware of this, the major change is that the short course GCSE, the half GCSE, can no longer count towards performance tables. I know that a lot of schools used two half GCSEs to make up a full GCSE, and that can count towards the performance measures. Now, the half GCSE will count in the wider performance measures, of course, but in the headline measures, because a half GCSE doesn't make up 120 guided learning hours, in other words, it doesn't make up a full GCSE, it won't be eligible to count in the headline measures. There is a distinction between performance measures and headline measures. The performance measures will measure everything as they do now, but the headline measures are the ones that have been in the news recently, and so that our half GCSE won't count towards the 5A star to C. Now, moving to the timeline. The first timeline I showed you was rather crowded. This is the same timeline, but with all the references to non-business subjects taken out, and as you can see, it's much simpler. We've only got references to exam series January and June that have affected business in the past. We've taken out all the March and November references, and hopefully this one will make more sense to you. So starting in September 2011, this is a reminder for those of you who do the course over 3 years, in other words who do a 3-year Key Stage 4, if you started last September with your Year 9s, then they will be subject to the new linear rules. Then for your Year 9s, there's little point in entering them for units in this summer or next summer, because they will have to do their units right at the end. It also affects when you can do the controlled assessment, because you can only use the 2014 titles and they're not available yet. So there are sort of implications if you have Year 9 currently who've started the GCSE. Moving along, January 2013, that exam series won't be available to your Year 9s or your Year 10s. This is going to be a restricted entry exam series, and it's really for use only for those students who are going to certificate, who are going to cash in June 2013. And moving along to June 2013, you'll see there that that's the last exam series with modular assessment. January 2014, you'll see series no longer used, so the January 2014 exam series won't exist. And then June 2014, June 2015, we've moved to linear GCSEs, and your students will have to take all of their exams at that time. Where we've got this on screen, could I just ask you another poll here to vote on how long you take to deliver your GCSE, just to see if we've got any 1-year, 2-year, 3-year GCSE schools here. Okay, thank you. It looks as though, just broadcast those, the vast majority of you here are doing the course over 2 years. We've got one person doing it over 1 year, and we've got no 3-year, no Year 9 starters. Okay. Moving to the next slide. Actually, no, there was a little bit left there for the September. Yes, a reminder there that the September 2012 series is the start of the linear approach over 2 years. So that's going to affect the vast majority of you. Now, the implications that this has for the teaching sequence, well, if we assume that you're starting Unit 1 in September with your new Year 10s, from January 2013 we should have the Summer 2014 controlled assessment titles available. So I mentioned this earlier, we're trying to make these available earlier to give you a little bit more flexibility. You'll have to make sure that it is the 2014 titles that you use. Now, moving along, you'll see that the June 2013 exam series has nothing next to it, because this is an exam series that you won't be able to use with your Year 10s. We do recommend at the moment, and we would still carry on recommending, that you do a dummy run. Perhaps you might use the 2012 titles or the 2011 titles, but to do a dummy run of your controlled assessment at the end of Unit 1, of your Unit 1 teaching, that might seem a logical time to do it. You might want to do it before or after June when that's convenient, and then at some point you may want to start Units 3, 4 and 5. Now, a lot of centres I know do this before the summer holidays, make a start before the summer holidays, but some will do it afterwards. The other use of this period between, say, the May half-term, the Whitsun half-term and the summer holidays traditionally has been to do the controlled assessment, where you will have the titles available. If you've done a dummy run a little earlier, you might choose the last part of the summer term to do your controlled assessment while Unit 1 content is still fresh in the minds of your students. This doesn't suit all centres, and I know that some centres prefer to do the controlled assessment in year 11 when the students come back after the summer holidays. So when you start units 3, 4 or 5, when you do the controlled assessment, may well depend on the decision you make over that. You don't have to do it then. I know there are plenty of centres who do the controlled assessment later, still in year 11, after the Christmas holidays, and that's obviously something that suits your centre. You have to make that decision. Then moving down to June 2014, you submit the controlled assessment. The May the 15th date won't change, and you'll do the Unit 1 exam, and then on a different day you'll do the Unit 3, 4 or 5 exam, but in the same exam series. If you want to resit, or if any of your students wanted to resit, remember there won't be a January 2015 series. They would have to wait until June 2015. They could carry forward their controlled assessment mark if they wish, but they would have to resit the units 1, 3, 4 or 5 all over again. On that timeline, I mentioned that we're going to make the controlled assessment titles available a little earlier. You'll have to make sure, I mean there's a potential risk here because there will be 2 sets of titles on the website that are live at the same time, because when the 2014 titles are made available in the January of 2013, the June 2013 titles will still be live, so you'll have to make sure that you take care to use the correct titles. We would still recommend that you do a dummy run at some point before you do the real thing using expired titles. Could I just ask for another poll here, just as of interest to us as well, but you might be interested in the results that other people are giving. When do you currently do your controlled assessment? Do you do the controlled assessment in year 10 before May the 15th? Do you do it in year 10 after May the 15th? Do you do it in year 11? Do you do it in year 11 before Christmas or after Christmas? Could I ask you to hopefully you can see that in front of you. Could I ask you to vote on that particular poll? When do you do your controlled assessment? Right, thank you. Let's just show you all the results of those. Looks as though very few people do their controlled assessment before May the 15th in year 10. We've got some doing it in the end of the summer term, but the majority of you seem to be doing it in year 11, and before Christmas seems to be a popular time. Right, well thank you for that. Let's just move that out of the way. Now the teaching order of topics. We look at the teaching order. Clearly there is an implication of linear GCSE that you don't have to teach Unit 1 followed on by Unit 3, because the assessment is going to be all at the end. The current modular structure certainly seems to imply that you should teach the small business unit, the enterprise part, before you teach the building a business unit, or the other units in Units 4 and 5. Now, the spirit of the course when it was written was that the student should be introduced to small business, micro business, to enterprise in year 10, and then spend year 11 looking at how a business might grow, or some of the economic and communication implications. If you decide to change that and teach perhaps by theme, it's easier to do if you're teaching the business pathway, Units 1 and 3. You might go back to a more traditional teaching model, teaching by theme, or you might decide that when you're teaching a particular topic, to take for example the introductions to market research in Unit 1, you might decide to go into more depth there and teach some of the Unit 3 content, if that is something that you feel follows on naturally. So it may well be that you would like to see or to revisit your scheme of work as a result of this, and I mean, that's obviously something that you'll have to decide in your department. In terms of the teaching order of things and the timing of things, I'd like just to ask another poll here. This is going back to the controlled assessment, but going back to getting an idea of dummy runs, could I ask you to vote on the dummy run element of controlled assessment? Alright. Thank you. Let's just broadcast those results. It looks as though 2/3 of you roughly do a dummy run and a third don't. That may be related to the timing that you've chosen. You may have more of an opportunity to do the dummy run with the linear approach, because there's less pressure to get the controlled assessment completed by May the 15th of year 10 if that was when you chose to do it. Okay, thank you. Now, with the teaching order, one thing that you need to always remember is that you're teaching the skills as well as the content. If you do decide to change the teaching order and mix up Unit 1 and Unit 3, for example, you're going to be introducing some of the skills, the Unit 3 skills, but this is really a slide just to remind you that the teaching of the skills is worth introducing right at the start of Unit 1. We have had some centres who've hit some problems where they haven't taught some of the higher order skills in year 10 because they focused essentially on knowledge and application to prepare their students for the year 1 exam, or the Unit 1 exam, and then they found that the students have struggled with the controlled assessment, which does require the higher order skills. So the recommendation would still be that to equip your students right from the start, it's still worth teaching them the higher order skills and getting the students used to some of the Unit 3 or 4 and 5 exam techniques right at the start of Unit 10, so that they're familiar with those techniques over the 2 years. So that's still something that would say is very important. Other skills that you might teach alongside, still going back to Unit 1, I'd just like to ask this poll here. I know a lot of teachers I've spoken to, I don't know how common this is, do a mini enterprise activity trying to broaden the skills of the students in that first year, so that when they're teaching Unit 1, maybe in the autumn term, they do some trade fair, craft fair, mini enterprise activity for the Christmas of year 10, and they try to link Unit 1 to that. So if I could just ask you to answer this one: do you run a mini enterprise activity alongside Unit 1? The majority of you don't. Let's just broadcast that so you can see the results. Only a third of you do. Now, if you haven't thought of this might be something that you'd like to consider. There are some fairly structured mini enterprise activities you can do, borrowing from the BTEC in money and finance skills, and a lot of the skills required there are skills that do fit nicely into Unit 1 Topic 2, so that might be something that you'd like to consider. Let's just close that one and move it out of the way. Now, we've been through some of the teaching order, some of the consequences. Let's look at exam preparation with this last slide. Clearly, one of the things that's going to change is how you prepare your students for the exam. A lot of centres got both units 1 and 2 out of the way in year 10, or at least got Unit 1 out of the way in year 10, and then spent all of year 11 focusing on Unit 3, 4 or 5. Now, what can you do to help prepare your students? Well, as long as the past papers are available, and we've got several sets of past papers available. With all of those past papers available, you've got some past questions that you can use through the 2 years. We're going to, from September, hopefully have something called an exam wizard available, which is going to allow you to construct your own mini tests using past questions. so that if you want to pick a theme, our exam wizard will allow you to type in that theme and have past questions and suggested answers available on that theme, so that you can give your students mini tests by topic as you go through. We've also introduced, and we're planning to sort of extend this and make this more public, the mock service in Results Plus, so that if you want to give your students more mock exams, you will be able to use Results Plus to analyse the results of those, and we hope give useful feedback to your students on their exam technique and the areas of strengths and weakness, so that you can use the Results Plus in the same way that you've been able to use it when resits were available, but you'll be able to use it to get feedback from mocks, so that for exam preparation we'll have a little bit more help available for you. So we've gone through the key changes. You may be wondering, well, there isn't actually that much change. Hopefully that reassures you. How are we going to sort of help you through what changes there are? Well, a summary here on this slide. We've got this exam wizard I mentioned before, and Results Plus, the mock analysis service, which we're preparing to help your students maybe a little bit earlier in their exam preparation in Year 11, but also throughout the 2 years. We've also got our controlled assessment support. Now, we've got several pages on our website of frequently asked questions, and we're also planning for September some extra support here. We're going to run some online training sessions with the chief moderator. We're hoping to support some network events and also produce standardisation packs. Now, these will supplement the exemplar materials that we've got at the moment, and allow you to see examples of work, but also to help you within your centre, if you have more than one teacher, standardise across the teachers. We're going to have available some other schemes of work. Now, if you're not going to change the order of the units, then the scheme of work probably won't change that much, but you might want to put in some extra mock opportunities. But if you're going to change the scheme of work to reflect themes rather than units, then we are hoping to have a suggested scheme of work available for Unit 3, where that's perhaps more relevant. There will be in the autumn some free online tutorials as well to help you with this, and some events, face-to-face events. The other ways in which to get information, these haven't changed. We've got the e-updates that I send out, which I hope that you're on the mailing list for. If you're not on the mailing list, then using that email address there you can email me and request to be put on the mailing list. We can put you in direct contact with the Chief Examiner, Keith Hurst, using the Ask the Expert service, and Keith answers questions on controlled assessment. If you've got specific questions on controlled assessment, Keith will get back to you very quickly, I mean, that's a very useful service if you're stuck on either how an assessment criterion can be assessed or how to prepare for the controlled assessment, how best to prepare your students. We're going to, or we have already sent you out in February and in March, letters that have gone to your heads of department, if you're not head of department, to keep you informed of these changes. And on the subject page, we've got information as it becomes available. We put information up there. So these are different ways of getting information. To summarise, let's just reassure you that the changes are fairly minimal, but let's just go through some of these. Started by saying that the move to linear assessment would have a small impact. You're going to move to 100% terminal requirement, replacing the 40% terminal requirement, and some schools have done this or been doing this already. it does have an impact, but it's a fairly straightforward thing for your students to grasp, and it's something that's happening across all their GCSEs, so your colleagues in other departments will be facing the same change. We're not planning, and we haven't planned, or we haven't changed the content of the units. So Unit 1, we've still got this same enterprise theme, small business flavour. Unit 2, the controlled assessment, is still going to be testing Unit 1 content. And then the content of Units 3, 4 and 5 is exactly the same. We're not going to change controlled assessment. There'll still be the 5 tasks covering broadly the 5 topics in Unit 1. The change I mentioned there was that the tasks will be made available sooner. And then the last 2 bullet, well, the 4th and 5th bullet points there, you're not allowed, or your students won't be allowed to take units more than once, so you won't be able to use the January exam series or the June in Year 10 to put your students in for Unit 1 or perhaps Units 1 and 2. The exams will be restricted to the summer series, the end of January in other words, and just 1 attempt. The headline measures, as far as the full course GCSE, there's no change. The full course GCSE will still count on the headline 5A star to C and 5A star to G headline measure. The only change here is the half course, the short course, which will figure in the broader performance measures but won't count in the headline indicator of 5A star to C GCSE. So you won't be able to use the half GCSE, top it up with a half GCSE in another subject and have that count in the headline measure. The EBAC you'll be aware of, but that doesn't affect business. And if you would still like some more information on the GCSE reforms, then we've got a GCSE reforms page on our website to take you through those.